Hello and welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. My name is Alfonso Peluso and I'm a Studio Associate Professor in the College of Architecture at IIT, the home of the legendary Mies van der Rohe, and I'm adjunct faculty at Columbia College, Chicago in the Interior Architecture program. Shout out to all my students. I hope you're having a great day. It's a nice day today in Chicago, around 70 degrees. I hope all my students are doing well. Today we're going to look at Enscape for Rhino lighting. And on the left I have a little image of what we're going to end up with. And on the right I have an outline of what we're going to go over. So we're going to cover quite a bit when it comes to Rhino lighting. Before we do that, head on over to my YouTube page, and if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. There's tons of videos for everyone that's looking at anything digital design. Click on the subscribe button and click on the little bell to receive all the notifications. Also, connect with me on Instagram at my first name Alfonso, my last name Peluso. See what I've been up to with my students. They just finished a great spring semester over at IIT and Columbia College as well. And see what I was doing out in Toronto, checking out some great architecture there. Alright, let's jump into today's tutorial. So to start off with, we're looking at Enscape 3.5 that just was released I think yesterday, so that's pretty cool. Some new improvements in Enscape 3.5. Another thing we're going to look at is launching Enscape and how to pin the window to the top. Okay, so when we're doing this, I'm going to go ahead and close Enscape. We're going to want to look at the Enscape menu. So I'll pull that up. So when you first launch Enscape, it takes a little while to load everything into its memory. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that this window stays on top of all our other windows. And to do that, we're going to go to settings. So we're going to go and click on the little gear. And we're going to go to preferences. And we're going to want to make sure pin Enscape window on top of the host application. Otherwise, it keeps going to the background and that can be very frustrating. So we want to pin that on the top. Okay, so cameras. We're going to start looking at making a cameras. Cameras are very important, of course, for making renderings in any program that you're looking at. So we're going to make an interior camera that is similar to the one that you see in the Enscape window here. Okay, to do that, I'm going to open up my Enscape Basics file. So if you haven't checked out my Enscape Basics video, go ahead on YouTube and search it up. Enscape Basics, and go ahead and watch that video. That video will take you through all of the basics for Enscape. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize our little outline here. So this is what we ended up with in our Enscape Basics tutorial. So we made a cool little rendering with some people and trees, and we looked at some materials as well. So we have to look at cameras. Okay, so camera 1, I'm gonna set us back to camera 1. So I'm gonna go to named view and get us back to camera 1. That'll give us an eye level camera to begin with. And let's look at all 4 of our viewports. So I'm gonna go ahead and hide all the people and trees. I'm just gonna do that. They ended up on the default layer, so I'm just gonna turn off the default layer. And I'm gonna type in named view again. And I'm going to duplicate our camera 01. So I'm going to click on the little duplicate button. And I'm going to go ahead and rename it just by double clicking on it. I'm going to call this interior. And I'm going to set this, right now by default it's camera 1. I'm going to set it to interior just by double clicking on it. But first I want to make that the current viewport. And then I'll double click on this. And now it becomes interior. And now I can move that camera around. So I have to see that camera in the Rhino window. So to do that, it is the F6 key. If you're on a laptop, it is function F6. So function F6 on my laptop. will turn that camera on. I think I have to be out of that window. Yeah, here we go. So there's that camera. So it's going to show in all the viewports except for the interior viewport, because we're looking through the camera in that viewport. So we don't actually see the camera because we're looking through it. So when I'm moving my camera around, it's best to make sure that my snaps are off. So my grid snap is off, and my O snap, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And I'm just going to click on the little dot here in the middle, click on the little grid, and I'm going to go ahead and move that inside. So it's already at a eye level height. I like my eye level height a little lower than eye level, so it's already at 4'6" high. Let's take a look at the lens length. So here's my interior camera. I want to make that current. I want to go over to properties, and my lens length is set to 25. So it's a pretty wide angle camera lens to begin with. My height is at 4'6", which is at 54 inches for both the camera and the target. When I'm looking through this camera, I want to make sure that I see both walls on the left and on the right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to move this camera outside just a bit here. So I'm moving it outside just a bit so that I can see. I don't want to go too far where I see the edge of that wall. I'm going to go right there. I might have to adjust that later when I go into the Enscape window, because Enscape, it doesn't match exactly the Rhino camera. It widens it out a little bit. It also depends on the proportions that you're rendering this out at. Alright, so let's go ahead and save this camera view by making sure the interior viewport is current, typing in named view, and go ahead and click on save. Do I want to overwrite it? Yes. Okay, there it is. There's my interior cam, so I won't lose that. It's embedded into Rhino. Alright, while we're working on this, I'm going to go ahead and save as. It's important to save often when you're rendering. You never know when it can crash. Alright. Alright, let's go ahead and look at our outline. So we looked at cameras. Next we're going to be looking at sun angles. So to look at sun angles, we're going to have to open up Enscape and see what we have to begin with. Okay. So I'm going to stop showing my camera by just using function F6. That'll turn the camera off. There we go. I'm going to zoom into these viewports a little bit so we can see what we're looking at. Okay, so let's look at the sun. So I'm going to open the Enscape window up. Okay, so there is a sun in the scene, and I can move that sun in real time if I go to, there's a little help panel on the upper right here. If I go to time of day at the bottom here, it's the shift key and my right mouse button. So I'm going to hold down the shift key and my right mouse button, and I'm going to move my mouse right and left. Okay, so I can move it right and left, and that's going to change the time of day. Now, you know, with this it's really nice to be able to move the sun around with the mouse, but I'm not getting, I don't have full control over it. I only have real-time lighting scenarios. So you notice when I was moving my mouse and the shift key, I wasn't getting any lighting on this left wall. Well, let's say I want to have some lighting on the left wall. Then I have to move my sun manually. And to do that, I can use the Rhino sun. So I'm going to type in sun. And here's my Rhino sun, and I'm going to move these viewports around, see if I can work with both of them at a time. Lost the sun one. Let's get it back. There it is. Okay, so under sun, I just typed in the command sun. I'm going to turn on the sun, and I'm going to change it to manual control. Then I'm going to move that sun around, and now I'm getting it on the left wall which I wasn't getting it before. So I'm getting that on the left wall. I want that to come into the room a little bit more. How about that? Okay, we'll settle for that for now. Okay, there's our sun. And what I can't do is I can't change the sun intensity. So let's get that window back up here. I can't change its intensity. So if I change this to 10, it's not changing the intensity in Enscape. If I change it to 0, it's not changing the intensity in Enscape. So to do that, let's take a look at that. Let's see if this is in our little outline here. So sun angles. It's down a little bit lower. Sun brightness, visual settings, and atmosphere. Okay, so let's look at changing that. So visual settings and atmosphere. So in the Enscape window, visual settings is this little eye with the little slider. So if I click on that and I go to atmosphere, go to the atmosphere tab, I have a sun brightness, and I can, 80 is the default. I can raise that sun brightness, and it doesn't do much. At a certain level, it doesn't do much going higher. Let's lower it so we can see it. And what I want you, there we go. What I want you to pay attention to is the way that sun is bouncing on the roof. And at a certain number, it doesn't get any brighter. So you have that to make adjustments with. Pretty much if you want to lower it, because it was at 80. And from 80, moving 80 forward, it didn't really get much brighter. But we can make it less intense. Alright, I can always double click in here and type. So we'll make it 80%. Alright. So next we're going to look at, actually look at spotlight, hotspot, and fall off. So we're going to jump down to spotlight and taking a look at that. And before we look at that spotlight, I want to add in an asset to have something to cast shadows, to make that spotlight light up something. So we want that to be able to light up something. So let's do that. Okay, so over here in the Enscape window, we have the asset library right here. I can go ahead and click on that. Take a few seconds to load into memory. And let's go ahead and make this bigger. Okay, so we want to look at furniture. So, you know, we don't want to have to go through this whole library to look at this. So we're going to look at furniture. So I'm going to type in furniture. Okay, so doing something wrong here. There we go, categories. Alright, so we click on the little infinity symbol and we're going to go to furniture. Okay, so a lot to choose from. I know in here is a Corbusier chair and an ottoman, so I'm going to go with that. So I'm going to click on my Corbusier chair. And I'm going to drop that into the scene. Now I can do this in the Enscape window, or I can do this in the Rhino window. So it's up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in. And I'm going to look for, there's the ottoman right next to it. And I'm going to go ahead and drop that in. Okay, and I'll click on Apply Changes. Alright, so now I need to, rotate the chair, and I can click on it here, and I can rotate it, or I can just do it in Rhino. So let's go ahead and minimize this and look at doing this in Rhino. So I'm going to go over in Rhino, click on that chair, move it a little bit. And my gumball is turned on. So with that turned on, I can click on it, and I can click on this little arc on the outside to do rotation. and my ortho's on. So since my ortho's on, it's rotating in increments, I think, of 45 degrees. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to move this a little bit more into the camera. Okay, so that's looking pretty good in the camera here. All right. So now we're going to place in a spotlight. So let's get the Enscape window open up here. Let's close the Asset Manager. Make this window a little bit smaller. Okay. So we'll see if we have to adjust that camera. Right now we're looking at the edge of the wall and the edge of the floor, but we'll see what our final preview makes for us. Okay. So we're going to look at making a spotlight. So we're going to type in the command spotlight in Rhino. And my snaps are off, my grid snap is off, and my O snap is off. And I'm going to create my base of my cone. I'm going to create it right in the middle here and drag it out. And I'm going to drag this up. So I'm in the front viewport, so I made the base of the cone on the top, and I'm making the elevation of it in the front viewport. Be careful not to put your top of your spotlight in an element like the roof. So I have it just a little bit lower here, and you see that spotlight shows up in Enscape in real time. So I want to manage some of our layers. So managing the layers is really important in Rhino and Enscape, and we didn't do that with the furniture and the lights. We want to make sure that we put those on their own layer. So I'm going to minimize the Enscape window. I'm going to go over to layers, and right now everything was put on the grass layer because that was the current layer. So we'll take layer 05 and we're going to call this one furniture. And we don't want to have a color white, so we'll give it a different color. How about orange? And then I'm going to select those two objects and right click on the word furniture and choose change object layer. So now those are both on the furniture layer. And now I want to make a new layer for my light, my spotlight. So I'm going to go ahead and call it spotlights. I like to have a layer for each type of my lighting, so I'm going to make that one current. Okay, and I'm going to put the spotlight on the spotlights layer. Okay, so furniture should turn on and off. Okay, let's see what's going on in the Enscape window. Okay, all right. So the spotlight, what's important about the spotlight is we want to be able to control the hotspot and the fall off. So right now, if you look at it in Enscape, it's not catching the very top of the Corbusier chair, and we can control how wide the hotspot and fall off is in plan, so to speak. So let's look at the top view, and when I select the spotlight, on the left there's a little dot for the hotspot. Sometimes it's easier to do it without the gumball. I'm going to try and do it with the gumball. Click on that point. There we go. So you might have to zoom in. So there's that point. That's controlling the hotspot. I can drag that hotspot in, or I can drag that hotspot out. Okay, so let's look at changing the fall off. So the fall off is on the right side. There's a little dot for the fall off on the right side. So there you go. You see that happening in real time in Enscape. See that widening out. Let's widen that out a little bit. Okay, so now you see it's catching the top of the chair. So you want to be able to move that around in Rhino, the hotspot and the fall off. Okay, next we're going to look at point lights. So for point lights, I'm going to have to make some recess openings in the roof of this structure. So I'm going to go ahead and close the Enscape window. And I'm going to work a little bit in Rhino. So I'm going to make a new layer for this. I'm going to call this layer Recess Can. I'm going to make it current. Okay, so I'm going to draw a circle for this recess can. So I'm going to use my grid snap in this case, and I'm going to put it right here in the middle on that grid line, a little bit into the space. So I'm going to type in circle, and the radius of the circle is going to be 3, so the diameter will be 6. So you see my radius is already set to 3, so I'll press enter. And I'm going to select that circle, and that circle by default is showing up at the very bottom. So I'm going to raise that up. I'm going to type in move, and I'm going to move it. My grid snap will help me in this case because my grids are set up. So my grids are set up to line up evenly with the bottom of the roof. So I'm going to go ahead and raise that up. Now it's been raised up, and now I can extrude it. I'm going to extrude it up half of the ceiling. The ceiling or the roof is a total of 6 inches, so I'm going to raise this up 3 inches. Okay, and I'm going to subtract it using Boolean difference. But before I subtract it, now I'm going to copy it to 2 more locations. So I'm going to select it, copy, and I'm going to copy it 5 feet in this direction and 5 feet in this direction. Okay, so that's all of my lights that I have, and I can subtract it from the roof. I'm going to go ahead and select it here. Well, first, before I do that, let me type in the command Boolean difference. And the object that I'm going to subtract from is my roof, enter, and then my cylinders, enter. Okay, so those have all been subtracted. So how does that look in Enscape? Okay, so when Enscape doesn't show up as your current camera because I'm not in my interior view, it's really simple. You can go to the little bifocals and you can click on interior, and that will zoom to the interior view. Again, we still don't know exactly what this interior is going to look like, but we have the 3 recess can openings for our lights. So let's go ahead and place lights in there. So we're going to create a point light. So I'm going to go ahead and move this, try to keep this Enscape window open as much as possible. Okay, so I'm going to put that in the lower right. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call this point light. Make it current. I'm going to type in the command point light. And I'm going to place that with my grid snap. I'm going to place that right in the middle there. Okay, I saw something light up in the Enscape window. So you're getting that right here on the floor. And it's lighting up on that wall there, so we need to move it from the floor to the ceiling. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to select it, type in move, using my grid. Okay, so that should be in the ceiling. So we see that in the ceiling. And I'm going to copy it a couple more times to each one of those openings, those recess can openings. Let me make sure it's at the right height. Yep, it's at the right height. So I'll go ahead and copy that in plan. Okay, the grid snap is really helping out here. Okay, so we see that. Now, the point lights or sphere lights, they do light up the room. You see the room has gotten brighter and it's reflecting on the walls and on the floor. What I want to do is I want to be able to control that brightness. So I can do it a couple ways, and let's look at both of them. So one way that I can do this is I can go to visual settings and I can go to atmosphere and I can change the artificial light brightness. So I can lower that down. You see that that's lowering down. Or I can raise that up. So that's one way to do it. But it affects all the artificial lights in the scene. It's affecting my spotlight. Let me move this over a little bit. It's affecting my spotlight. So ambient light brightness. It's affecting all the lights in the scene. Artificial light brightness, I should say. So I'm going to keep it at 100%. And what I'm going to do to make these lights a little dimmer, my point lights, to make those a little dimmer, I'm just going to do it through Rhino. I'm going to do it through the lights command. So I'll close this window. In Rhino, I'll type in lights. And you see it shows all my lights. And because I copied the lights, I didn't use copy paste. I didn't use Control C, Control V, so that's important. Don't use Control C, Control V when you copy your lights. Use the copy command in Rhino. So I copied those lights with the copy command. I'm going to go ahead and change the brightness. I'm going to make it 0.3. Okay, so now you see I changed that, and it changed for all three of my lights. Make them a little brighter. How about 0.5? Okay, I'm gonna settle there. So my point lights are typically like accent lighting for like these recessed cans. It's just showing up. It does light the scene as we saw, but I don't overdo it with those because I want my other lights to be more dramatic like my spotlight is. Okay. So we'll go ahead and close the lights window. Let's see what's next on our outline here. So what have we done? We've done Enscape 3.5. We've launched Enscape cameras, sun angles, point lights. We've looked at lights, changed the intensity. We've looked at sun brightness. We've looked at adding assets like furniture. We looked at the spotlight, hotspot, and fall off. We looked at changing the artificial light brightness. So next thing we need to look at is a rectangular light. So when I'm working in Rhino and V-Ray, I use the rectangular light quite a bit. But we'll see that with Enscape, it's not such a friendly light choice, to put it that way. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tuck this into the corner, and I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call this soffit, and I'll make that current, and I'm going to draw a little soffit. So I'm going to do that in Rhino. I'm just going to do it with a box. Just going to use my snaps for that, and I'll make it 2 inches tall. Okay, you see that shows up on the floor, and I'm going to go ahead and move it upward. Okay, maybe 1 grid line up. Okay, we'll see how that works for us. We might have to lower that down, but not sure. So that makes our little soffit for us. So we're going to put a light in that soffit. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. I'm going to call this rectangle. It's actually rectangular light. That's the command, is rectangular light. I'll make that current. I'll type it in Rhino. Rectangular light. And I'm going to put it right where my soffit is. So it's asking for the light length first. So I'll give it the light length and then the light width. And I'll take a look at that here. I see it down low and there's a little arrow. So I'm going to have to rotate that so that that's up. So I'm going to select it and rotate it. Okay, so that's up. And I'm going to move it into position. I'm going to turn my grid snap off. Okay. So what's happening in Enscape? So I'm not really seeing it here. So I'm going to move it, I'm going to select it, and I'm going to move it out of the, there it is, the rectangle light. And what you see is it's not a rectangle light, it's a point light. So, wah, 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 for Enscape and the rectangle light. So that's not working. So we're going to have to do this with a line light or a linear light. So let's turn off the rectangle light layer. Let's make a new layer. Call this new layer, call the new layer linear light. Make it current. Now let's see, does the rectangle light go away when I turn it? There we go. So rectangle light's gone. Let's tuck this down into the corner here. So we're going to make a line light or a linear light. So linear light, light origin, I'm going to make that, turn my grid snap back on. I'm going to make that here. The length of it, I'm going to make it the entire length of the soffit. And I'm going to pick that light up. If I can select it here, linear light, I'm going to move it up. I'm going to turn off my grid snap, move that up. Okay, so what's happening in, alright, so we're getting a nice linear light here. It's not quite the whole length of the soffit yet, so you might have to use multiple line lights or multiple linear lights. So I'm going to make one more so that it goes all the way out on that soffit. So let's see, let's move it in the X direction here. Alright, so now I have it right on the edge. You can see that right on the edge, and it's not making itself all the way into the room. So in this case, I'm going to copy it, and there it's making it to the edge. Okay, so now we have it. Now we have it all the way through the room. Now, one thing I don't love about it is I don't love the shadow that it's casting. And normally I would go in Rhino, I would select this object in Rhino. I would just select the soffit and I would go to properties. And let's see, do I have more than one object selected? Let's see. I'm looking for the shadow casting. Here we go. Under rendering, I would turn off cast shadows. And I don't know if I needed receive shadows, but it's not working in Enscape. You can see that they're still making a shadow. So that doesn't work. So hopefully one day that will work. For right now, I'm going to look at moving these two lights around. So I'm going to select both lights. And I'm going to move them a little bit. See if I can get rid of that shadow. Okay, maybe. Let's look at this in an elevation view. Zoom in really close to it. Let's look at moving them down and see if that helps anything. Okay, there's the shadow. There, moving it to the left gets rid of that shadow a little bit. Let me get it right about there. Okay, so I still have the shadow that the sun is creating, but I don't have a big shadow on the floor, so I'm happy with that. And the linear light is still working in the soffit, so that's great. I'm very happy about that. Okay, so let's look at what's next. Okay, so we looked at rectangular light, we looked at linear light. We have to look at emissive light, where an object will actually light up a scene, which is, I think, really cool to be able to control inside your renderings. So it's usually called emissive in Rhino, V-Ray, and some software it's called self-illumination, and in Enscape it's called self-illumination. So we're going to make an actual object and make it self-illuminate. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's tuck our Enscape rendering away here. And let's go to layers. And let's make a new layer, and we'll call this Emissive. We'll call it Emissive box. And we'll make that current. And I'm going to go ahead and type in the command box. And I'm going to make a box. See, my grid snaps off, my O snaps off. So I'm going to go ahead and make a box. Okay, there's my box. And I'm going to make this box, I'm going to make it have rounded, nice rounded edges. So a little bonus material. So some bonus material here. I'm going to type in fillet edge. And I want to make sure my next radius is set. So you click on next radius. I'll set that to 6 inches in this case. Select edges to fillet. I'm selecting the whole entire box here in the top view. The whole box. I'm going to press enter a couple times, enter a couple times, and there's my box. Let's take a look at that. Yeah. Let's see, it's a little bigger than I wanted it, but that's okay. We'll go with it. Okay, so how's this look in Enscape? Alright, so there it is. So we want to make this box, we want to make it glow. Okay, so we're going to make it glow. So we're going to make a material. Okay, we're going to make a material in Rhino. I'm going to click on the little circle here. And I'm going to change this to be Enscape. I'm going to name it. I'm going to call it Emissive or self-illuminated. Okay, now in my Enscape materials, I find that here in my Enscape toolbar. It's the black and white checkered sphere. I'll go ahead and click on that. Let's kind of see this happen in real time if we can. Here's my emissive material. I'm going to click on it. And I'm going to change its type. So it's not going to be generic. I'm going to change it to emissive or self-illuminated. Okay, so not much happening here. Here we have a luminance slider. So I'm going to go ahead and move that luminance slider. You see it starts to self-illuminate. Some softwares do this better than others. I'll give Enscape like a mid, what's the word I'm looking for here? So it's not doing a great job. It's doing an okay job. Alright, so the self-illumination is doing an okay job. So I'm going to go ahead and change its color and see what we can do here. There you see that. You can change its color. Now I don't think I can go above 100, which I'm not happy about. If I type in 200 or 2,000, well that's 2,000. But if I want 100,000, if I want 200,000, it defaults back down to 100,000. So it works decent when it was white, kind of self-illuminates, but didn't work so great when it's colored. Okay, so something that's bothering me, something that I meant to do, is the lights that we made. Let's go ahead and zoom in. Wonder what's happening there in that light. That's interesting. I have no idea what that is. Alright, but I want to make some trim for these recessed lights. So I'm going to go back to my camera. Okay, and we're going to make some recess trim for those lights. So I'm going to go ahead and just close out of my Enscape window to do this. I'm going to go to my recess can layer. And I'm pointing this out because everyone watching and listening, you want to add detail to your scene. And this is one way that we can add detail. Alright, so what's happening? What is this object? I'm going to type in the command what, because I am just so interested in what that actually is. It's just like when I Boolean difference my object there. made these little things. Alright, well, it's always fun to run into something new. So what happens when I delete that? And what happens when I delete this one? Okay, I have no idea. It must have been something with the fillet edge. Definitely something with the fillet edge. Just I can see the way it crosses over that. So that was fun. We did some cool fillet edging there. All right, back to the topic at hand. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take this circle. So I'm gonna make sure it's on curve, and I'm gonna offset it 2 inches. I'm exaggerating it because it's far away from my camera because we have this crazy wide angle camera. So I'm exaggerating it. Okay, so I have this curve and I want this curve. And I'm going to extrude curve. I'm going to zoom in here. So I'm going to extrude this curve down, let's try 2 inches. Okay, so it's pretty big. So I'm going to select that extrusion and I'm going to copy it. Copy it 5 feet and then place it and copy it another 5 feet, so 10 feet, and place it. Okay, so now in our window here, we see the little light trim. Let me type ZS for that. Okay, so we see our little light trim. It's a little exaggerated. Now let's get this back to our camera view. Okay. Alright, so get Enscape open back up and take a look at our outline. Okay, so you see those little trim lights. They're a little overdone. They're a little on steroids there. So I can always change that. Alright, so emissive material self-illumination, we looked at that. Now we're looking at exposure. Okay, so we can look at the overall brightness of this scene. So we can do that by looking at exposure. So let's go ahead and do that. So under visual settings, atmosphere, I know this is the wrong spot already because exposure comes with the camera. So you want to be able to see that through the camera. So under main, camera, we're going to look at exposure. So by default it's set to 50%. So let's move this window over. Okay, so I can change that. Okay, so we see it's getting darker. So I can change its exposure. I can make it brighter. And the default was 50%. I'll leave it there. We have our field of view that we can change. So we can zoom in and out of this a little bit. So if I'm worried about seeing the edges of those objects, I can just fix that right here in Enscape. So there it goes. Fix that a little bit. Okay. The other thing is depth of field if you want a little blur. So I'm going to, this is some bonus material that really isn't in the outline, but we can look at that here. So you can see that it starts to blur the background. It's focusing on the chair. Let's do it with a focal point. So this is so many meters away from the camera. This is really cool stuff here. Alright, so it's focusing on the ottoman right now. Let's get the focus on the chair. Now it's focusing on the chair a little bit. So if you want to do some depth of field, you can do that. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Alright, so I know we're getting toward the end here, so let's tuck this away. Let's close this. Okay, so next thing we have to look at is output and then our final screenshot rendering. So for output, we're going to do that under visual settings output. So we're going to click on our little visual settings. We're going to go to output. And this is where we have our resolution. So In my traditional rendering softwares like V-Ray, where I have to wait for it to render, I've been using Full HD, which is 1920 by 1080. Since this is a real-time rendering engine and I don't have to wait for it to render, I'm going to render it out higher. And you see I have options. I have Ultra HD, which is really high, 3840 by 2160, or I can do custom. And I'm just going to do custom 2500 by 1500. It's a little bit of a different aspect ratio than HD is, but that's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to make a video that goes over these settings under image, but for right now I'm using a PNG, and I'm not making it transparent. I'm not making a transparent background. I'm going to use my sky color, so I'm unchecking the apply alpha channel. Okay, and that just does the setting. It doesn't actually make the image. What we have to do to make the image is we have to use a shortcut. A shortcut, or we can use this screenshot, Shift F11. So Shift F11. Okay. Shift plus F11 didn't really work for me. Let's see. Alright, when in doubt, press on the button, I guess. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. Alright, so we have a little bit of time here. I'm going to save that. But I want to take a look at that. It's exporting the image. So you see how quick it is. I mean, it's, seconds to output that image. But it's going to take a little bit longer to turn on all of my objects. So you saw when I started out this video that I had all the objects on. So I'm going to turn on the default layer. And that's going to take some time. While it's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and you see it's putting in the trees one by one. So you have to wait for that to generate, but it's still pretty quick, and we're getting some nice shadows from that. Go over to Photoshop here and open up my image. Okay, so that first one, or that last one we just made, okay, it has all the material IDs and stuff with it, and I'm going to make a video about that. Let's take a look and open that up. Alright, so that looks really nice in Photoshop. Let's go back over to Rhino and see how it's doing. Alright, so it's still regenerating, and my computer loves it. The computer fan is kicking on, and you can kind of hear that in the background. So it's going to kick on while it regenerates. Alright, there we go. Everybody's in shadow because the sunlight is coming from behind the people. So not, the most ideal scenario, but there they are. Let's go ahead and save that. Can I get my Shift F11 to work today? What happens if I click on the window, the Enscape lighting window, and then Shift F11, because I love shortcuts. Alright, there's always something. I'm sure someone will let me know something in the comments. So I'm going to save this as Enscape lighting 02. It's exporting the image out. Alright, we'll take a look at that in Photoshop. There it is. Alright, so there we have it. Nice little image there. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this video on Enscape lighting. Next video that's coming out is going to be Enscape materials, and I'll put a link to that at the end of this video. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed and have an awesome rest of your day.